Hi, I'm Neil Cutmore, Managing Director of MortgageAdvice.biz. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, how long is the buying process going to take? So today I'm going to go through all the processes that are involved. Generally it's 8 to 12 weeks, but invariably different parts can go wrong, and so I'm going to tell you about each of those bits so that you understand where you are in the process and how much longer is still to run. So the first thing will be follow the videos that I've made about how to get a credit report, how to get yourself on the electoral roll, how to get your bank statements, how to make copies of your passport, etc. so that you're ready to meet me, your mortgage advisor. And when we meet, we're going to go through things like, are you employed, self-employed or a contractor? How much deposit do you have? Are you being gifted any deposit? Have you made a budget plan of your expenses? Things like your council tax, your utility bills, have you got any debts? Ultimately, at the end of this meeting, you want to know how much can you borrow, and ultimately how much, including your deposit, is your purchase price that you can afford. I will also tell you roughly how much that's going to cost you a month. And I say roughly because the time that we actually have our meeting, the deals are changing all the time. The rate that might be available today might not necessarily be the rate that you ultimately get when you actually put in your offer. So, but you'll have a very good understanding and a very rough idea of what you can afford and what that payment will be. We could proceed to something called a decision in principle or an application in principle. Generally, I advise against that unless you're actually going to put in an offer the next day, because same thing, if a deal changes and we've gone with a lender like Nationwide for your decision in principle and they're not the cheapest anymore in a month's time, we've potentially left a footprint on your credit file, which we don't want to do. And that, in essence, is what a decision in principle does. Decision in principle, based on the information that you provide me, is a credit check to see whether or not you are good enough for the money. And by looking at your credit report and going through your pay slips, I can potentially tell you that without having to do the decision in principle. And a lot of estate agents will take my word for it that you're good for the money. Once you've got details of how much you can afford, you can then start searching things like Zoopla and Rightmove. And don't forget to register with all the estate agents, because some of the properties don't even make it to these portals like Rightmove. They'll go straight out to the people that they have verified and registered, and then they're positioned to buy straight away before they even attempt to go onto the website. So make sure you've done that first. And if you have a property to sell, make sure you get that under offer before you start searching so that you're in the best position to make an offer. So you found the ideal property. It ticks all the boxes. It's by the schools, it's by the station, it's close to work, everything. It's your dream house. But what do you put in as an offer? Well, you'll know the market roughly from viewing the properties that you've been looking at. But if you go on to something like Zoopla, on the house prices tab, you get a better idea of what actually is sold in the area before you actually make an offer. And that's what the valuer is going to come around and look at: sold prices, not prices that the properties are up for sale for. Then take into consideration things like, does it need a new boiler? Does the kitchen need doing? Do the electrics up to date? And build a list of things that you think, well, those little bits and pieces are going to need doing, and put a figure on it. And I always advise my clients, when they're going to put in an offer, always start low. You can't go in at full asking price and then start trying to go downwards. Start low and then come up. And typically you should offer between 5 and 10% less than the asking price. And then bring in those things like, I've viewed this property and that property, that one's up for sale at this price, the comparables, the list of things that you feel need to be done to actually make the property worth what it is. And then push forward your position. I've spoken to my mortgage advisor. I've got this agreed in principle. I've put my house up for sale and it's under offer. I'm in a position to go quickly. That's what the estate agents want to hear. Not that you've got, oh, I don't really know, I haven't spoken to a mortgage guy, I don't know what I can borrow, my property I haven't even put on the market yet, so that could be weeks away from actually getting an offer, which might not be enough, which then means the whole chain falls down. But the key thing with making an offer, if you're going to go 5 to 10% less, for example, is start low, then work up. If the property's up for something like 200,000, start at 180,000. They might counter at 190, you counter at 185. Keep going between those halfway houses before you can get to the stage where you're under offer. Once your offer has been accepted, your estate agent will generally write up a memorandum of sale. And that details all your contact details, the vendor's contact details, your solicitor, their solicitor, who you're borrowing the money from, and any special things such as, are you keeping the curtains, any white goods, are there anything else that you've agreed and negotiated that needs to be written into the more formal contract with your conveyancer. But then you're officially under offer and you can come to me to start your full mortgage application with all those details. So the next part of the process is the full mortgage application. So you're back in my ballpark. If we haven't seen each other in a couple of months, I'm going to ask you to update your bank statements, update your pay slips, so that we're ready to provide those to the lender to make that as quick as possible. As part of the application process, I will need the details that you got from your memorandum of sale regarding solicitor. But I'll also ask you whether you want a standard valuation or a home buyer's report. Now, a home buyer's report will give you a little bit more detail. It's not a full structural survey, which is a third option, but it's a cheaper option to highlight anything that, if you're not building savvy, anything that's a little bit out of the ordinary in terms of subsidence or damp, these things will be pointed out on a home buyer's report. A standard valuation is just for the lender's purposes. They don't have to tell you anything that's on that report, other than they usually provide you with details of what the rebuild costs will be, so that you can ensure that your building insurance covers at least that amount. So the mortgage valuation can sometimes be instructed by the lender, depending on who they are, straight away. Some will ask for all the documents to be in place before they instruct a surveyor to do the valuation. But generally, it takes about, if we don't have the valuation straight away, it's about a week to 2 weeks to get all your documents in, checked, and they'll then instruct a valuation. That's a key point, is the valuation date. Everyone wants to see when that valuation is. Tells the estate agents that the process is going through. Generally, when the valuer goes out to do the valuation, they have 48 hours to return their report to say whether the property is mortgageable or usable for mortgage purposes. Then probably about another 48 hours or more to actually the underwriters to check all your documentation and that valuation report before they issue you with an offer. Now, if you ask me which lender we're going with, I can tell you their service levels, and we can then give you an expectation of when that underwriter is going to look at it, so that we can get to the level of mortgage offer. And at that point, my part in the process is done. The lenders have basically said they will lend you the money based on your circumstances and based on the property that you've chosen. We're then over to your solicitor to start the conveyancing process. And the first things that they will do is something called property searches. The first thing your solicitor is going to do is a local authority search, make sure there's no planning issues. Things like, is the building listed? Is it in a conservation area? Are there any outstanding statutory notices? Any breaches of planning or building regulations? They will check building control. They will check if there's any new proposals for any new roads, rail schemes or planning decisions that could affect the property. They will also check whether the house stands on contaminated land or is in a radon gas area. Next, we have environmental searches, where they will check whether there's any flooding issues like rivers in the area that burst their banks, if the area is subject to any landslides or subsidence, and if the property's been built on contaminated land, like a previous factory. After that is water and drainage searches, where they'll check who owns the sewer, the drains, and the piping coming up to your property, yourself or the water company. Is it actually connected to mains water supply and sewer, or does it have a cesspit, for example? And whether the water supply is actually metered or paid on a rateable value. Then we have minor searches such as chancel repair, which is where if you're in a village, you may have to pay towards the church roof being repaired, for example. If you're in Cornwall, you might have to have a tin mining search, or if you're in the Cheshire Brines, you might have to have a search for the chance that your property may be affected by what's going on underneath it. And that covers pretty much the searches that a solicitor will carry out as part of the conveyancing process. So the next stage of the process is answering inquiries. And this takes the longest because it depends how many inquiries there are. They will look through all the information on the title that's been received, all the information from the local authority searches, make sure that the boiler's okay. They might have asked for those certificates. So all this information has to be gathered back, has to be assessed to make sure that the property is not only sellable, but mortgageable. And that's why when we fill in the mortgage application process, I have to make sure that your conveyancer is on the lender's panel, because they actually have to represent not only you for the buying process, but also the lender from the mortgage side. Once these questions have all been answered, we lead up to the process of being able to exchange. But the reason why this can take 2 to 8 weeks to a year is that depending on how long the chain is. And what do I mean by a chain? Well, if you're purchasing a property, that person might have to move to somewhere else and find another property, and the person they're buying from has to find somewhere else, and so on and so on. And everybody has to be able to exchange on the same day and move. That usually occurs if you've got someone buying at the bottom, first time buyer or a landlord, for example, and at the end of the chain is someone who has moved into a empty property or someone has passed away. So that's generally how a chain gets formed. The shorter it is, the quicker it happens that you will be able to exchange and complete and move in. So you're ready to exchange contracts. Before you exchange, you'll have been given an exchange date, and you need to ensure that there's buildings insurance in place the day of that exchange, purely because you will be liable, and therefore the lender will want their money back if the house burns down between exchange and completion. At that point of exchange, you generally will provide a 10% deposit to your solicitor, who will then transfer it to the vendor's solicitor. Don't worry if you don't have that amount, your solicitor will generally negotiate an agreement if you have, for example, only a 5% deposit, or your deposit is all made up of your house sale. But if you pull out after you've exchanged contracts, you will potentially be liable for a 10% in some way, shape or form, and will be sued for it. So up until this point, you weren't legally obliged to do anything. You could have walked away on the day before exchange and said, no, I don't want this property. Likewise, your vendor can say right up until that point, you know what, I'm going to sell it to somebody else. So at exchange of contracts, the property is legally yours. And it's generally done by solicitors on a Friday with a completion date set a week after that. And the reason why it's usually a week and not the same day is because if you have a chain of people, they all need to organise their removals and a convenient time to do that. And if everyone did it on the day of exchange, and for whatever reason one person didn't exchange, all these removal men would be waiting to move your property and be told, sorry, it's going to happen another day. But they still weren't paying for it, so your costs would be going through the roof. So that's why there's exchange and then usually another week at least until completion. But that date can be agreed by everybody within the chain. And that's it. Completion. You usually pick up the keys on the day of completion from your estate agent and move into your new house. So overall, the whole process, if no one else is in a chain, and it's a freehold house, for example, is about 8 to 12 weeks. Other factors can vary the process significantly, but if you follow the basic steps above, you'll have an idea of what is left to do and who to chase. And if you are taking on an estate agent yourself to sell, speak to them about their sales progression person, because that person is worth their weight in gold, in my opinion, in an estate agency. If you like this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe and click the alert bell. Thanks for watching.